This one gives your body instructions to store energy for a rainy day. Do your own research.
What you've just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
Wake the up, Eddie Abu has no clue.
The world, the science, it's all made up.
Back in 2021, we got introduced to Brian Johnson, the self-proclaimed king of organs, aka the Liver King, and his own take on the optimal way to eat and train, not just for performance and building a solid physique, but also for health and longevity. And at the time, we had just come out of a huge P-word and we didn't know what to make of the fitness scene anymore because people had just been posting home workouts for the last year. So when the Liver King came around, it was like a breath of fresh air. The guy had a pretty solid physique and he also had a very different standpoint to what the traditional fitness influencers had. He claimed that eating raw liver, sleeping on a wooden crate, and training like a traveling merchant was the way to go if you wanted to achieve a physique like his. And a lot of people actually believed him until he got popped for an insane drug protocol which would put most IFBB pro bodybuilders to shame. Which is when he also lost most of his traction and everyone saw that he was full of shit. But it goes to show that when somebody has just a unique way of explaining a message and says something that we would like to believe is true, a lot of people would just follow up on that. Even in the fitness industry with people selling the message that a certain exercise or supplement or even restrictive diet model is the way to go for optimal results. And everything that we've known for the last 100 years from science is just plain wrong. And that's exactly the type of person Eddie Abu is. For those who don't know, Eddie Abu is a retired bodybuilder who recently blew up on the social media scene, mostly with short format content on TikTok and Instagram, where he would enter grocery stores and just shout to the camera about how most foods that people eat are quote-unquote bullshit. They're not real food, they would cause disease, obesity, shorten lifespans, and reduce quality of life. Now he doesn't say it like that, he just calls everything bullshit and just tells people to wake the fuck up, which I guess is one way to make your message heard.
Do your own fucking research.
Now Eddie, at the time of making this video, is a solid gentleman sitting at the ripe age of 61 years old, and he has competed as an IFBB pro bodybuilder in the 90s and early to mid 2000s, while also working as a psychiatric nurse. So throughout his life, he's had some pretty alright experience with understanding how the human body works. Now he doesn't understand all of it, which we'll get into shortly, but he does have a far better understanding than the average person, which is also why he can get away from arguments without actually explaining himself on certain topics.
Do your own fucking research.
But let's start with his primary objective, which is to inform people on how to eat for a healthy mind and body. A pretty solid idea, especially in the modern day and age where obesity and poor lifestyle habits are a primary driver of premature death. Just shedding light onto diet is definitely important. But in Eddie's case, because it doesn't get as much clicks and likes, he doesn't only shed light on what foods to avoid and comes with an explanation as to why, but he often generalizes a group of foods into a single category because he doesn't understand it. Take candy for example. I think most people can agree that candies like chocolate, Sour Patch Kids, and sweets in general should be consumed in very low amounts, and arguably they shouldn't be consumed at all. Mostly because they are very high in refined simple sugars and sometimes saturated fats, while having virtually no decent micronutrients, minerals, or fiber to even justify eating them. Then on the opposite side, you do have fruits and vegetables which are full of vitamins, fiber, and are generally pretty filling, and from a nutritional standpoint are very healthy. Take blackberries for instance, which contain 5 grams of carbs, 1 gram of protein, and 3 grams of fiber per 100 grams, which equals to around 35 calories, meaning you could actually eat a full kilo or 2.2 pounds of these and get the caloric equivalent to a small cheeseburger at McDonald's. But not only will foods like this be super filling relative to the calories they contain, blackberries also contain a solid amount of vitamin E, vitamin B9, C, magnesium, all of which are very lacking in the average diet. But surely Eddie Abu thinks there's a huge difference between eating candy and eating fruits, right? Well, no, he doesn't. Actually, he says that any food that contains sugar, which is basically every food aside from meat and eggs, should be avoided because all carbs are the same and sugar is bad, completely neglecting the overall positives of the food. And also, our bodies have literally evolved for tens of thousands of years to consume carbohydrates, which are broken down into monosaccharides, or glucose, which is the simplest source of carbs. And carbs from different food sources often have different complexities and are broken down at different rates, which is partially why potatoes, for example, are more filling than a regular sweet or candy. and apart from ATP generation from phosphocreatine, breaking down glucose is the most preferred way for the body to extract energy for movement, but also for the brain and maintaining brain cells. So saying that all sugar is bad is just silly, especially when fruits and vegetables contain so many micronutrients and fiber which the body needs to function. And they're also great for weight loss because they are super filling, and Eddie Abu, of course, he preaches that you should be eating simple and clean foods, to which I highly agree. Simple foods are usually the best way to go about a diet because you can easily know what they contain and they are usually pretty filling, and you don't have the added sugar or fats for flavor. But I guess fruits, grains, and vegetables are too complex for Eddie? Yes, I agree we should skip out on most of the refined simple sugars like sweets, but fruits, veggies, and grains, which have proven time and time again to improve quality of life and reduce all-cause mortality, no chance.
Eat an egg. 48% of the egg can become muscle tissue. And please, before you say, where's the research? Do your own fucking research. There's a lot of research. This is the knowledge that I learned when I first started training.
And it would be fair to discuss these things if Eddie would actually make an educated attempt to explain why he thinks this way. But whenever somebody asks him to cite his work or explain the research, he just tells you to do your own fucking research and calls you an idiot. Because he's not responsible to explain anything, which tells me that Eddie himself has never actually read the research. Like this meta-analysis which found people who eat more fruits and vegetables live longer and have a lower risk of developing cancer and cardiovascular disease. And you can find tons of articles on this across all age groups, both old and new, and if you ask any nutritionist or a doctor who has a decent understanding on the matter, they will all say the same thing. Now, not every doctor is an expert on nutrition. I actually believe that many have a very lacking knowledge on lifestyle and nutrition in general, but if you don't want to believe the doctors, then just read up the thousands of studies on how fruit and veggies affect the human body. It's pretty conclusive that the positives they bring far outweigh the negatives for most people.
Here's why you shouldn't eat fruit. If you're trying to lose body fat, it means that you're carrying unwanted body fat. That means you are insulin resistant. The thing about fructose is that fructose is what you find, is the sugar that you find in fruits. Now, all your cells can use glucose, whereas fructose is only broken down by your liver. If you are trying to lose body fat, you need to control insulin. And when you're eating too much sugar, you are not controlling insulin. And when there's too much insulin in your system, your body decides to store energy for a rainy day.
Now, I had to make some cuts here because he takes 5 minutes to say something that should take 30 seconds. First, Eddie says the most important part about weight loss is insulin control, which is false. It is actually being in an energy deficit. And if it was insulin control, his diet would be just as bad, because a high-fat diet has a stronger link to insulin resistance than a diet rich in carbohydrates, mostly because of how calorie-dense fat is, and that it causes more intestinal inflammation and endotoxemia. And low-fat diets actually have a stronger relation to reducing insulin resistance. Actually, even a high protein intake is linked to higher insulin secretion and higher risk of developing type 2 diabetes. Again, showing it's not about sugar, it's about overall calories relative to how much your body uses for energy. And yes, some people can become type 2 diabetic without also being obese, but that can be explained with genetic heredity, which is the driving factor to becoming diabetic in the first place, even though diet and lifestyle are large risk factors as well.
Fruit is supposed to provide us with fiber. Most of the fruit that we eat, they're all essentially bags of sugar.
Eddie also says fruits are like bags of sugar, even though they are mostly water and don't actually contain that many macronutrients in the first place, at least relative to their weight. Now, Eddie also proclaimed that fruits are bad because they contain fructose, which the body can also use for energy, but he says that fructose is bad because it gets stored in the liver as fat, which is actually partially true, because the liver can actually store fructose as fat through lipogenesis. But again, this is only when fructose is consumed in too high amounts, and how do we define amounts that are too high? When the body is already in an energy surplus, aka you eat more calories than you use. And it isn't even specific to fructose. It happens for all macronutrients in general whenever you are in a calorie surplus. He also says that fructose can only be used by the liver, which is also false because peripheral tissues, specifically muscle, can also use fructose just like we do for glucose. There's also tons of studies reporting better muscular performance after fructose consumption, which is pretty solid if you want to get more out of your strength training, but also endurance work. And say if you eat 2 apples, you'll probably just get under 200 calories worth of food, and a decent chunk of fiber. And it'll also keep you full for a long time and therefore also be pretty darn good for weight loss. Now, Eddie Abou does go on to explain that a very restrictive diet model of basically eating only eggs, fish and meat, combined with a very limited set of vegetables, has helped him feel better physically and mentally. But we have to point out the massive elephant in the room, being that Eddie Abou for a long time was a massive professional bodybuilder who took loads of performance enhancers, which likely messed him up permanently, for which he still probably takes testosterone replacement, which also helps him maintain muscle. So he is not a representative of the general population at all, nor is he eating anywhere close to what he did as a competitive bodybuilder. And he claims that because he felt better using a very restrictive, low-calorie, carnivore-style diet, that everyone else should too. And that not only will it cause you to become healthier overall, but that it can also cure incurable diseases like Crohn's disease, which is a whole different topic, but to say it quickly, Crohn's disease is a genetic inflammatory bowel disease which basically causes large parts of your digestive system to swell up, which can make you have to visit the toilet more than 30 times per day. It's super painful and can at worst cause severe malnourishment, dehydration and also premature death.
Doctor says I've got Crohn's and I've got problems with my gut. I'm supposed to go on this medication. What do you think? I'm like, are you fucking stupid? There is something you're putting in that fucking gut that's causing that. Straighten the carnivore diet. Take everything out. Eat just meat, eggs, fish, salt.
Now, it is true that some people can actually have reduced symptoms by following a restrictive diet for Crohn's disease, but it does in no way cure it, and there is no clear indication that any specific diet model will reduce symptoms more than others. But Eddie Abou literally said, against what every doctor on the planet would recommend to people with Crohn's disease, that they should stop taking their prescribed medication and just eat meat and eggs instead, and it'll go away on its own. Eddie hasn't only gone to people with genetic diseases telling them they should just eat it away, but he has also disputed the best perhaps known fact in the fitness industry, which has been proven right in thousands of studies and is a general rule of thermodynamics: calories, which are a unit used to measure energy specifically from food. And yes, Eddie Abou says that calories don't make you fat, carbs do, which is an outdated myth I thought we left back in the 1980s, which is probably also the last time Eddie read a research paper. I don't even see why he would think that, because again, he never explains it, but he says something about that calories from different foods send out different signals to alter hormonal balance and makes it store certain calories as fat, while others are used as energy. In this example, he uses a Snickers bar versus an avocado, which are quite different foods that contain the same amount of calories. So, of course, I tried looking this up and found absolutely nothing, so I don't know where he gets this supposed information from, but he says that even if they are the same amount of calories, one will be stored as fat, whereas the other won't, which is just blatantly false, because studies have shown that regardless of where the nutrients come from, only excessive calories above maintenance will be stored as body fat, regardless of whether they come from carbohydrates, protein, or fat. Now, of course, I'm not saying that the Snickers bar is in any way healthier than the avocado, because they do contain different nutrients, but in the sense of gaining or losing weight, they hold the exact same value.
Whey protein versus an egg. When you eat an egg, 48% of the egg can become muscle tissue. And please, before you say, where's your research? Do your own fucking research. Whey protein is 16%. If you've got a bar that says 20 grams of protein, that's less useful for you than the egg.
The same goes for whey protein. Yes, shocker, Eddie is not a big fan of whey protein, even though he is a fan of milk and dairy products, which whey is literally a byproduct of. But anyway, he claims that whey protein will not build muscle and that it is a quote-unquote low-quality protein source. And if he said it was a low-quality food source, then I would agree with him. But saying that whey doesn't build muscle is simply wrong, when studies have found it performs just as well as protein from red meats. And heck, it's simply a supplement that should be used for the sake of convenience if you don't have the time to get a solid meal in. Just mixing up a protein shake will at the very least get you the protein your body needs to recover, even if it doesn't come with any decent micronutrients. And protein powders actually have the highest bioavailability of any protein source. Now again, I'm not saying whey is an overall better food source, but saying that it's shit food and shouldn't be consumed simply because it's in powdered form is just wrong.
I'll tell you why I eat 10 eggs every day. Eggs are good for you.
And finally, Eddie is a big fan of eating eggs, and I do wholeheartedly agree that eggs are a very, very, very undervalued source of protein, but also for micronutrients because they do contain a lot of vitamin D, B9, B12, vitamin E, iron, magnesium, phosphorus, and other things that the body needs to function properly. Yes, they do contain a fair amount of cholesterol, but genetics and obesity are much larger risk factors than eggs, and dietary cholesterol does not seem to play as much of a role as previously believed for blood cholesterol. Either way, eggs are great and you should probably have a few every day, but Eddie doesn't stop with the eggs are good for you. He goes above and beyond, claiming that eggs can actually outperform anabolic steroids. Yes, Eddie Abu, a man who has previously taken copious amounts of anabolics himself, claims that eggs will do the job just as well.
You can actually eat so many eggs that there's some of the guys who are taking steroids. It wouldn't need to take steroids because eggs are that good at building muscle.
Now, of course, I'm not saying that you should take anabolics. I don't recommend it to anyone. But claiming that eggs will have even remotely close to the same effect on testosterone and overall muscle building as literal performance-enhancing drugs is beyond stupid, especially coming from an ex-IFBB pro. And the mishaps of Eddie, they don't end there, because if you look at this post where he firmly says that he's experienced many weight loss clients who simply start eating so-called real food and all of a sudden drop in weight. But what Eddie fails to understand is that eating these so-called real foods will usually also translate to eating more protein and foods that are generally more filling, making it much easier to get into a calorie deficit and maintain it. Now, he does touch upon something very important here, saying that people who do a massive calorie deficit will usually bounce back in weight, and it is because they don't adapt their lifestyles and their diet properly. It's super difficult to maintain a massive calorie deficit, you'll feel less energized, and you'll also become less physically active because of it. Therefore, making smaller changes at a time and slowly swapping calorie-dense foods for veggies, potatoes, rice, and meat will likely keep you full for longer and also allow you to live decently. Now, I take on weight loss clients myself, just like Eddie, and that's honestly great because I think we need more people who can actually help others become physically healthy through improved lifestyles. But falsely claiming that calories don't matter and it's simply about not eating sugar is very unethical. It would be the equivalent of a fake natural guy selling training programs to new lifters. You absolutely do not need to cut out carbs, like my client Priscilla, who recently lost over 50 pounds while also getting stronger in the squat, bench, and deadlift, and is now much healthier mentally and physically. Her diet plan has over 40% carbohydrates, aka what Eddie would call sugary shit, and no, it's not the same as a candy bar because she's eaten loads of fruits, greens, potatoes, rice, and even pasta, all while consuming a decent amount of protein too. So weight loss shouldn't just be about massive food restrictions. You should be able to eat stuff that you actually enjoy and find a way to actually fit that into your diet you can maintain for longer, which is why I personally take a long time to design these plans from scratch, while I can imagine somebody like Eddie just has a template of meat and eggs which he gives to every client. Which it would probably work for some, while others would find it repulsive, but you would never hear about those clients, especially from him. So is Eddie Abu simply stupid, or does he actually have a decent message behind what he's saying? Although a lot of what he says is literally false and disproven, and just serves as a way to fearmonger, likely for financial gain and to sell his own programs and courses, he does have a very important message that people should be eating more real foods, consume more eggs, and overall more protein, and that diet is a pretty vital part of becoming healthy. That's why it is so important to also call him out on the stuff that he says which is false, because most of what he says does hold value, especially with his audience being as big as it is. Do I hate Eddie? No, absolutely not. I think he puts out an important message, but I do think the fame has sort of gone to his head, making him think he can just say whatever he wants to and his audience will believe it. He does say a lot of good stuff in general, but please do not blindly trust the advice of somebody who is basically just an influencer. To make my point, I will also link a list of the citations I've used in the description for those who want to take a look. And if you want a coach who won't just give you biased advice which is outdated by 40 years, you can sign up to my coaching service linked in the description, where I do everything myself and I don't give out random templates. So let me know down below in the comments whether or not you think Eddie has mostly had a positive impact on the fitness industry or not. There's a lot of stuff that I did not get the time to cover in this video, so if this one performs well and people want to see more and know more about the topic, let me know and I might have to dig a bit deeper for the next one. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.